Hi, my name is Christina, and in this video, I will provide some practical ideas to teaching and learning online. Above all, I think it's important to remember that it is not only us, educators, that may not be used to this form of teaching and learning. Students too may also find it hard to transition from the type of learning strategies that they have developed and embodied it throughout the years. As such, I think it is important to take small steps and create explicit practices as well as to express our expectations in clear ways. Many of the ideas that I will outline here are meant to be simple and holistic and of appeal to different modules and courses that you may be organizing. For more localized online teaching practices, please draw inspiration from the theoretical understandings that I discussed in my previous video and blog post. I would invite you to ask yourself how your online classes strategy can observe one or more principles of digital culture. For example, how can they promote creation and sharing of content by students themselves, how they can foster social connections that are relevant to what is being studied. How can we encourage learners to contribute in different ways, be it through the development of new content, but also through reasoned discussions and commentary to what is being learned. And also, how can we instigate different forms of mentorship and peer support as part of our activities? So, thinking about those principles, um, try to think also what would be effective in the context of what you're trying to teach. In my opinion, there are two essential aspects to teaching and learning that should always be in place independently of what our approach will be. One is about welcoming students to the learning spaces that we have created as part of our pedagogical approach. And this can also work as a way to socialize them into the learning practices that we can expect them to engage with during such um, sessions and modules. And the other one is to give students some sense of ownership of the places that they will be learning in. And this can be done in different ways, as I will outline in other sections of this talk. For example, they can decide collectively which spaces students will use for their communication, but above all, there should be an agreement of what the rules of conduct should be in online spaces. To socialize learners into a digital learning culture, I would prepare some pre-session activities to get students involved. These activities do not have to be exclusively scholastic, they can be mainly social, as a way to get students to know one another and so that they can engage in certain rituals of communication and start to build some type of trust and confidence, not only among themselves, but also with the tutors. These are key characteristics of an active learner online. And activities in that sense could focus on one or more of the following ideas. For example, ways of building presence, of connecting to each other, of contributing information, discussing ideas, sharing resources, or creating artifacts. For example, Professor Mike Wesh in the US usually starts his modules or courses by inviting students to create a 3-minute video introduction where they reveal 3 things about themselves. He also does one of these videos um, so that he can mentor students on how to do so. And this then usually opens conversations between students and starts to create some sense of connection among themselves. In the past, I have also devised different types of fostering connection. For example, I have set small challenges for students to get involved in as part of them getting the grips with the technology that we were using. For example, on Twitter, I've launched what I call the challenge a day for a week, where students could start to understand how Twitter could work in more academic ways for them. For example, one of the challenges was to follow 10 people working in a given field of relevance to what they were studying, and these people could be academics, policymakers, practitioners, and so on. I've also asked them on another day to share their favorite resource about what was being studied or the course in general if the course hadn't started yet. I would also ask students to engage in a given debate by using a hashtag, for example. What matters here is that we create informal ways through which students can gel and can get to know one another through these forms of socialization. And the use of technology in this case can be used effectively to achieve this purpose. Equally important when we move our teaching and learning online is to develop a joint understanding of the rules of engagement and what do we expect of one another when we are interacting in such places. This allows everyone, individually and collectively, to reflect on their online presence and activity and to have a say on how they expect to work online. You can open the conversations for students to outline their suggestions, or you can structure the discussion with specific questions around the principles that you want them to discuss. Whichever strategy you take, make sure that in the end, you or the students write up the code of conduct that has been agreed and that is then made available to them in the online spaces that they interact. If you need ideas on how to guide these discussions, the Internet Society provides some good examples on the code of conduct online, and the link is available on the slides. Having set the ground rules and started the process of socialization, we can also think about ways through which we can engage our students online. The ideas that I am about to suggest are pretty simple, but hopefully they will open up ways through which you can draw inspiration to develop more contextualized ideas to your own needs and to your own ways of teaching and learning. In my opinion, it is important to create learning routines and use synchronous and asynchronous learning time in effective ways. Online learning does rely on a lot of class preparation. This is key to keep synchronous sessions short, but also productive and interactive. If your module relies on students doing readings in advance, architect ways through which they can show that such prep work has been done. This can, for example, include students doing the readings on their own, as they would do in normal circumstances, but then which need to be summarized through reading cards or discussions that are hosted in online fora, for example. You could also use group work in which students bring their own understandings of the readings to create a resource or to annotate readings. For example, you could use a tool like peruseall.com that allows PDFs to be annotated collectively. For the other activities that I suggested, you can also find some tools suggested in the PowerPoint. I also think it's important to create routines regarding engagement with course material and give students responsibility for their learning, not only individually, but collective as part of a joint effort. So strategies could include dividing students in different groups with different roles that where you can have topic experts and knowledge curators, for example, and where one group is in charge of discussing and searching for evidence about the topic, and another group is in charge of curating and summarizing the topic into a resource that is then made available to everyone. You can then rotate these roles in groups as you move from one topic to another as part of your teaching. Just like in face-to-face environments, I think online also lends itself for students to take charge. And so, for example, we could do a rolling version in which students can teach some aspects of the module. For example, a concept or a minor topic. And the way that I find this to be more effective is when I ask students to embody a certain role. For example, the role of the researcher, where they're supposed to research the topic to explain it to a different audience, meaning that the rest of the students will also embody a different role, which is of a given audience. And the audience could be practitioners or policymakers or the lay public, for example. What this basically allows is that both activities require the students to prepare and study for the topic being discussed, so that both can explain it in a reasoned way, backed up by research, and that the audience can also ask questions for that they find that will be of use to their own students, to their own peers. I also think it's important to discuss between synchronous time and asynchronous time. And I'm of the opinion that we should make synchronous time really count. And so these sessions that are in real time should be sessions for interaction, for discussion, more than they should be to cover material. And as we all know, online synchronous classes are quite tiring, so we should really be making use of them in ways that are far more effective. For example, we can invite students to submit questions or comments or passages of the readings that they've been doing for discussion in the class, and have that as an interaction where students also explain why they were sharing these questions or citations or comments about what they've read and engaged with as part of their course. What I have done in the past as well was to have students use breakout rooms in tools such as Zoom or Blackboard Collaborate, where I've given them something to discuss after having given them a short presentation, and then allow them to basically capture their discussion in through, for example, a poster. In the past, I have used Jamboards, which are part of Google Drive, but I'm aware that in places such as China, for example, Jamboards are not available because Google is not allowed. So you need to find different tools to do this. Why I've used Jamboards was because they can capture information through different types of text, visual, written text. You can even have links to other resources. And why I've used the Google Drive was because I could open up these spaces for content creation and without students logging in. So it means that as soon as students had access to their Jamboard, they could just get cracking and get editing the content as part of their discussions. Obviously, you will also want to create your own content, and this can be done also for asynchronous interaction, so that the students can access at their own time and then engage with it in different ways. My recommendation here is that you develop what I'm calling micro content. That means to create any type of artifact, video, audio, for students in kind of sections of 15 to 20 minute maximum. So this is more effective in grabbing people's attention and allowing students to engage with it. So this can be done through the traditional way of talking heads, but we could also find different ways to do this. For example, we could collaborate with colleagues within or beyond our own institutions to discuss different topics. For example, we could, for example, interview a colleague about the paper that they've written or about the research that they're doing, or more generically, about an issue that is of relevance to the module, and this can be done through different types of tools, and then we can extract the audio or video file from that interaction and use it as part of our class, for example. As we engage with the creation of knowledge for online learning, it is also important to come to grips with some of the movements connected to online learning, especially the open access movement. This will be known to many of us in relation to research, but it is also related to teaching. Two key aspects are worth highlighting here. The first one is the Creative Commons licenses that allows content creators to license their work in ways that can be used and repurposed for further use by other individuals. And you have some of the links on the slide. And the other one is open educational resources which using such licenses contribute to a collective pool of teaching ideas educators can tap on, but also contribute to. So there will be quite a lot of teaching ideas and course content available online through these movements that may be worth checking out when seeking inspiration for your own classes. And in return, it's just fair that whatever we create, we then also develop content using same licenses that can then be again sent back to the community, to the open access and the open education resources community. Hopefully these examples were useful to you. Obviously, like I said at the beginning, these are just simple ideas that can be applied in more holistic ways to a great majority of modules that people will be teaching online, for more localized ideas to the needs of what you want students to learn and how you want them to engage. I would invite you to draw on the principles of digital cultures and think in which ways you can use online environments to devise your teaching and learning strategy. My final thought in this regard is that digital education is not just about imparting knowledge, and I think this is quite important for us to understand if we're to create experiences for students and for us that are meaningful. But it's not also just about consuming information. I think it's also important for students to understand that. It is, in my opinion, above all, about drawing meaning from these experiences and finding ways of communicating it. So teaching and learning online is pretty much an active process from all parties involved. And the sooner we get this across to the students that we're going to work with, then the easier that process will become. It is important that everyone is on board in that way.